This is Snakes and Otters, a pointless discussion of eternal questions. Get ready. We're about to live in your head rent-free.
This is episode 201, Manifest Destiny, and here's the group for you.
I am Martin.
And I'm Robert.
I'm Francis.
I am Marcus.
And I'm Cajun. I'm captain of this ship here this time around. And, we had some technical difficulties, solar flare or something on that 200th episode. We're not really sure what happened to it or where it's floating around out there. If anybody's got a clue or hears something about it, please let us know on that one.
Yeah, we worked so hard to record something cool, and then something's happened.
Snakes and Otters podcast at gmail.com. Let us know.
That's right.
That's right. Yes. All right, gentlemen. So, what are we doing today?
Manifest Destiny, the excuse of the Christian white man to romp, tromp, and go across America and claim it all for his own. All right, anybody want to refute that?
No, this was one of your ideas, Cajun, and I think it's a great one. We've talked about so many things around this,
It's
and
a
never.
very complex question because it was kind of a nebulous thing. It's sort of hard to define. Today's world, we think of it as, well, everybody was into it, but really it was just sort of an idea, sort of a minority idea for a long time.
Mhm.
Northerners generally were opposed to this concept because it meant an
Expansion of slavery, yeah.
Yeah.
That's the kind of the special wrinkle that covered all this, and it's actually an older item, although it wasn't really defined by that term until much later.
Right.
The
Right.
idea of we should be essentially, I mean, it's kind of like a Romulan idea. They want to own everything in
Well,
their idea.
see, I think own is
vision.
the wrong way to look at that because
Yes.
that's not how they looked at it. I think it was looked at as very much a savior complex in a national way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because the whole idea was to bring the goodness that is the United States,
Expand
to-
our perfect view across the world, and if you don't like it, tough. It's here now.
to expand that, to take that across the entire continent. It was seen as, we should expand west as far as we possibly can until we hit the Pacific.
And there's a fear of the continent being broken up into a bunch of little squabbling countries, much like Europe. That was something they feared and did not want to see happen.
Right. And, far better to be unified under them than somebody else.
Yep.
It's a Bella Oxmix way of
That's
looking
right.
at
Yeah,
things.
I got a bit of unity. That's right.
Correction to note, though, it did not stay just to the continent. That's how we ended up with a lot of territories and islands, too, underneath this Manifest Destiny policy. Hawaii being the most obvious one, Puerto Rico coming next, and,
Guam.
Guam and so forth. All that came about through this ideal.
Right. And would you all consider this to be, how does this relate to just pure colonialism, as in European colonialism? Because
Well-
it's not the same, but it sort of kind of is.
It's hard to say it's exactly the same, but there's a whole lot of similarities, I think, for obvious reasons. It's not exactly the same in that the parts of the continent that were colonized, for lack of a better term,
Yeah.
were still contiguous with the United States. That's unique in colonial history.
Right.
They always went to faraway lands and ruled from thousands of miles away. And you could make the argument that that's what Washington does.
Right.
But I mean, it's still a contiguous continental territory that was conquered. So
Yeah, but
it's
we don't-
different in that respect. I don't know how much of a difference that makes in the actual practicalities of things.
Yeah,
It certainly
that's-
makes it easier to project power.
That's what's fascinating about this here, because the United States was not intending to subjugate per se, although that's what actually happened. It was more like, we're going to make you us, make you American, which is somewhat a British thing.
I don't know that I would call it that. Again, not to be contrarian.
No, I want to explore this. What is it? What
because
isn't it?
I don't know that it was necessarily we want to make you us, because for the most part they displaced whoever was in the way rather than assimilation.
And that's true. That's correct. Assimilation only came later, and it kind of.
I don't even know that we've ever really assimilated.
No.
Exactly how.
There's still a lot of reservations out there.
That's exactly
Trailer
right. That's
kids,
why-
I mean, like you said, they moved them out of the way.
Yeah, I mean, the those that were here that were part of the Spanish territories, former territories of Mexico, they fared better.
Yeah.
But then the original what we
Indigenous
call Native
peoples.
Americans, even though you can call them Native Americans too.
Right.
But they didn't get pushed out in the same way that what they called Indians back then did.
Part of it was there was a strong belief in the Republican notion that they'd start as small R Republican.
Yeah.
And so it was seen to have value to then spread that.
Right. Yeah.
And
that's
why shouldn't the whole continent be under this ideal form of government?
I think you've surrounded a lot of what the issue here is because there's an idealism with the American brand of this.
It's a
that was
romantic notion about who we were,
as opposed to the European idea of we're going to simply export our greed, whatever we can steal, take, oppress. That's all we really want. It enriches us, but we don't. We're not changing the world. Except to the point that we can control it. I mean, there's a line in the movie, great movie, Last Mohicans, that you guys might remember when Major Hayward comes in and talks to General Webb. He says, "I thought British policy was to make the world England," and of course he because Webb is kind of saying, "No, you have to reason with these colonials." So there's a dichotomy there and an issue with regards to that. But Britain wasn't out to export its form of government per se. They were, they're conquerors. They have governors. They're looking to the Roman model of provinces and things like that. Or am I inaccurate?
No, I think you're right, and I think, again, you tie in. You're talking about 100 years worth of this nebulous idea and how it got hammered on and morphed and changed. And again, Cajun brings up, after the Civil War, after you get into the post-Western expansion era, the very end of the 19th century, then it is about almost more of a colonial impulse. This rationalization that it's a military and trade necessity to occupy places like Hawaii or Cuba or whatever.
Well, outside of Hawaii, most of the rest of the extracontinental territory, though, outside of Hawaii and Alaska, are the result of the Spanish-American War, not direct expansion.
Right, but what to do with those things?
Yeah, well, in those cases, we did
all-
follow.
Yeah, it all
The European colonial model.
Yes,
Yes, yeah.
but
We inherited that too, though.
yes, but that was until we got those territories. I don't think we followed it.
Right.
I'm going to say something very provocative, and I don't mean this in the worst possible way that it sounds, but Manifest Destiny, I think, is best summed up as the German word Lebensraum.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up. That's exactly
And
that.
we normally only associate that with the Nazis.
Right.
That's what Hitler wanted, was Lebensraum, living space.
That's right.
Clear out the lessers.
Yeah.
Right.
Elbow room is what it would have been a word that we would have talked about. I mean, you might remember the old Schoolhouse Rock. They did a whole episode about elbow room, and it's about
Yes.
Manifest Destiny. It's about westward expansion.
Which is real unique that you brought up the Mexican territories and so forth, and it was Texas that it didn't quite work the same there because they actually became their own nation for a short while.
Yeah, and maybe because of that and the Mexican influence there, and the other formerly Mexican and Spanish-owned territories, they were largely a Christianized group. So that you could make the argument that that's the major difference between how we treated them versus how we treated the Indians that were moved off of the territory.
Interesting.
Fair aspect
that's right.
on that. Yeah.
Yeah, since there was no religious.
Same for California.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say
yes.
California was exactly that way because it was thoroughly Christianized. The assimilation was easier.
I mean, a bunch of papists, but still.
Well, yeah, but there was plenty of that in the colonies that they were able to.
Right, but I mean, but my
tolerate.
point is, Catholics still would have been a very much a minority. This is pre-Italian and Irish.
But less offensive than
Yes, but less offensive than
Paganism, essentially.
the savage red man.
Right.
Or pantheists, I suppose you might call that, that they had, even though they certainly.
I don't think they probably. I don't know that term probably came up much in that respect, but I mean, yes.
That's what we would call it. I don't think you're right at the
I
time.
mean, they just would have been savage pagans
Yeah.
is how they would have been seen.
And I think we projected forward Europe's response to that centuries before. We must convert at the point of the sword those who are pagan.
In this case, it was the point of Sam Colt.
Well, that's correct. Exactly.
As time moved on.
Very much so. And I think that's a fascinating way because when you talk about the somewhat you cannot, and maybe I'm getting a little ahead of us here, but we know when you talk about Manifest Destiny and its results, it's essentially the Indian Wars. That's where this all this kind of where it ends.
I wouldn't totally agree with
Now,
that.
it's got a lot of roots, and I don't want to skip over those. But
Well,
I
it
think
certainly leads to the Indian Wars.
Right. Once the
and it
Civil War
certainly-
is done and decided, then all of a sudden this enormous force looks west and says, "We got this." And you've also
I
you've had a generation of trained killers from the wars that are ripe to be that force, both officially through the army and unofficially through the wild, wild west, as they say. To totally,
Well, yes, we had to do something with all of those
And we just sent-
disaffected.
That's right. We just sent them west and to tame it, not very efficiently at times, but essentially that's kind of what happened.
True.
It is sort of there's the two phases of
Yeah.
this again because it is 100 years of
Well, the
very
first
nebulous
wave, they went
idea.
out, saw what was there, and we decided we want it. Then the next wave would have
Yeah.
been clearing out the indigenous peoples.
And that first wave goes back even to the Louisiana Purchase.
Exactly.
or even before
Lewis and
that.
Clark
Before, even
basically
before.
taking
Yeah,
off
that's
and
right.
mapping
That's
across
that's
country.
probably the
Yeah,
best.
Lewis and Clark. Yes.
That's probably the
I
very
mean,
best.
we're sitting in a city that is the direct result of the earliest Manifest Destiny.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
you're
launch
exactly
point.
right. Yeah, well, go back even a little bit further. Daniel Boone and his, the Cumberland Gap and all that. That was an early expansion of that.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked many times about how what else do you expect out of sending a bunch of disaffected no goods across the ocean. One,
Australia.
well,
yeah, same thing.
Same
I mean,
thing.
that's
Yeah.
exactly right. Yeah,
I mean, you're going to get a bunch of people who are going to be really ticked off when you try and exert control over them. And in many ways, that's a lot of what the Wild West was too.
right.
It was just the American version of us doing what the British did.
Out of sight, out of mind, and then when we decide we don't want them to run wild anymore, then they're mad at us.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's when we would send in the army. I tell you a great TV series, and I know this is one of your favorites that kind of lays this out in very good ways. Is Deadwood? See, I knew you'd go there. It's very much about
Excellent.
what's it looks like. What does that look like when
Yeah.
all of a sudden everybody's going out there?
No rules.
No rules, but slowly they're brought in because we all start to agree that we want to make money at this. That's part of it.
Yes.
And-
I mean, let's face it. As much as I remember this being taught in school, it was never presented as anything bad.
Oh, not at all.
Never.
Absolutely, it was like
And
it
we're probably
was-
the last generation that is.
That's right.
that's
It
true
was
for.
very jingoistic. Well, of course we did this, and we were gods.
Yes.
you know,
I mean, it was presented as a good thing, but greed really was at the heart of
Very much so.
if not the start, certainly the completion of the conquering of the
as it
continent.
gains greater acceptance because again it isn't universal at the beginning.
No, the Whigs were very much against it.
again, the Northerners,
Lincoln
the
and
Whigs.
Grant specifically are,
Yeah.
are called out as being against this idea of manifesto.
Right.
And John Quincy Adams was an original proponent, but then he realized, and credit to him for recognizing something and changing positions, because most politicians would never do that. But he realized, no, maybe this is not a good idea, and he eventually came down as opposing it once he realized exactly what he was talking about. He's a definite hero
Yeah.
in many ways.
But again, post-war, then it's
Well, this really takes
Even
off
it-
post Mexican American War,
yeah, it's well,
and then post Civil War is where it really
Ramps
kicks into
up.
high gear.
right.
Yeah.
Much wider acceptance, if not active encouragement, at least acquiescence.
Yeah.
On the parts of those
Well,
who had opposed it, they
I think it
Well,
goes
there's
back
no
to that.
choice.
What do we do with all these guys
yeah,
that
there's no options left.
Right.
Yeah.
And now
And-
that the slavery issue has been resolved, that was the thing that really kind of
Yeah.
kept the reins on this, because we really want it, but we're not going to let them have it, whichever that is. So,
Well, yes, I mean, the reason the South wanted to expand, why they
right.
were was they wanted more slave states,
Slave states.
so that they could guarantee that the federal government wouldn't take away their slaves. I mean, that's the entire reason they were for it.
Right.
Well,
And the reason the northern states, why we ended up with the compromise that said if you have a slave state, you have to bring in a free state, was entirely to check
The
that.
Missouri Compromise. Yeah,
Yes.
that's Henry Clay.
So yes, the great Henry Clay.
That's right. Yeah, Kentucky man, which was later undone by the Kansas Act, Kansas-Nebraska Act,
Yes.
Nebraska
which
Act.
by that nasty individual Stephen Douglas
Yep.
was the one that put that together and essentially undid everything.
Yep.
It's interesting to look back at that, and I don't know that the Missouri Compromise was sustainable. That's probably its
Well,
own.
I don't think it was
discussion.
sustainable because it inherently blessed the expansion of slavery.
That's right, and it was a fatal toxicity.
Yeah.
That was a viper at the breast, I think, is how it was often described.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they thought they were saving everything, but
They were just punting.
they were just
Kicking the can down the road.
It was
Imperator, you had something you were going to say?
yeah, I mean, one of the things you ended up with coming out of all of this towards the end was the state of Oregon.
That's exactly right. Yeah, that's one of the things that we talk about. All that was a big issue
It was.
that
Which was-
ignited a
you
lot
have
of this.
An entire state dedicated to saving slavery and separating out the whites.
That's right. Even though it was not a slave state,
Yeah.
it was the intention to
Yeah.
kick that can further down the road.
Well, one of the things that revisionists love to talk about, obviously we are willing to point out the warts and all here at Snakes and Otters. We don't believe in sugarcoating anything when
Amen.
it comes to history. But one of the things that I think is undeniable, even though the revisionists would disagree, is that it was inevitable that what happened. That the more I won't use the words more civilized, but the more technologically advanced East was going to expand and conquer the more technologically primitive peoples that they had pushed out west. It was just going to happen.
Yeah, and that is Darwinism in many respects.
Yeah. I mean, people love to point at the U.S. like we are unique in that respect, but we're not. We're just the most recent example.
That's right.
Of
It's
that.
the one that's in our.
It had
face.
already been done so long ago in Europe, in Asia, and Africa that nobody remembers when it happened.
Well, yeah, and that's one of the things that so many people rail against. They say, you European, colonialism and all that, which has its own evils. We're
Yes,
not saying
absolutely.
that it's not, but ultimately it was a force that I think was unstoppable.
Yes.
Well,
Whether for good or ill, this
Right.
is not the point. It was inevitable.
Yeah.
It was Thanos.
But you've currently got our legislators preparing us for the next phase of this social Darwinism.
How
Yes.
so?
Oh, our aliens.
Oh, you mean the immigration issues? Well, yeah, that's
Oh, I thought he meant
No,
the
no,
space
no,
aliens.
Space aliens.
oh those. Okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
we're having all the investigations and hearings on that right now, preparing us for
For our eventual overlords?
Eventual overlords coming in.
Preparing us for the reveal that the government has actually known that they exist for a
Yes.
number of years now without causing mass hysteria among the population.
Yeah, and then they'll come.
That
in
would be a cool episode.
Then
That's
they'll
for us
come
to
in and
do.
take over.
Well, I will not totally discount his theory on this. I think they know something that we don't know, and
Well, they
release certain information does cause hysteria among the population.
Well, yeah.
Well, and that we could talk a long time about that, about the weak mind. What was it they said in Men in Black? A person can be intelligent, but people as a
People.
general rule, are crazy, scared,
Irrational.
irrational
Panicky.
animals. Yeah.
Sheep.
Very sheep in many
Sheep.
respects. The larger the group, the more
Well,
hysterical they
that
are.
is very true. The larger the group, the more easily they are influenced as a whole.
right.
Oh, yeah.
Panic doesn't set in, hysterical panic doesn't set in amongst 5 people. 50 people, yes.
That's right.
500, oh my God,
And,
forget
yeah,
it.
And see that's that herd mentality that we've had. It's built into our DNA. It
Well,
goes
yeah,
back.
because
Which is perfect. That leads us right back into Manifest Destiny when this came out in the papers and everything. And Go West, young man. I mean,
yeah.
it
People
headed
bought
the
it.
people west.
well, it definitely speaks to what makes Americans unique. This has been true, I think, from the beginning. That's why the people who came here. They saw an opportunity to begin again, to strive against God and nature to build something. and Manifest Destiny is just the national expression of that. You know, being able to say that, you know, we went out not just individually, but as a people and tamed a continent. Now, whether you want to say tamed, subjugated, enslaved, however you want to put it, the end result is that the people who were here made this continent their own and remade it in their own image.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a uniquely American thing in the sense that it was, because even, you know, Britain trying to make the world England, you know, they were really unsuccessful at it.
That's right. Yeah, they were eventually overthrown.
Whereas
and
we were
kicked
not.
out.
And I think, you know, again, being that contiguous continent has a lot to do with that. Plus, relatively speaking, there just weren't a whole lot of people here compared to the force they were trying to stand against. You know, the white man outnumbered,
and outbred the native. the
yeah,
native
or,
inhabitants.
you know, outsurvived them. You know, giving
There's some
people
truth to that. Yeah.
blankets full of smallpox certainly helps in that respect. But I
Right.
mean, you think about the,
Destroying their main food source,
you know,
the buffalo,
when you think about the,
bison, actually.
yeah,
Right.
Correct.
That's right.
Nation.
but you know, when you think about the reduction in population from when the white man first arrived, you know, you had thriving empires that were nearly wiped out just from disease because they just had no defense against it.
And that's right. And
It wasn't malicious.
No, not at all. It was
in that sense. I mean, there was a lot of maliciousness. Don't get me
that
wrong.
was Darwinism in its scientific form, as opposed to its social form.
Yes. Yes.
Not to say that there wasn't social Darwinism that took place
Oh,
as
absolutely.
part of that. I mean, the Aztecs were, and if you think about it, Aztecs is a pretty good example because they were a brutal, awful, repressive regime.
Yes.
And you know, we blame the conquistadors for a lot of evil, and there's certainly a lot of that to go around. But they also, you know, removed a society that was based in human sacrifice in many ways.
Yes.
So there's a lot of sin to go around, which is possibly one of the eternal questions. That
Well, there's a lot of sin to go around no matter what, because we are all fallen creatures, whether you are you believe in a triune God or not, we are all fallen creatures.
Yeah, it's interesting that the power of greed seems to be that which floats to the top on all this. In many respects, you can kind of work back into that. And I don't know if that's a indictment against capitalism. I don't necessarily want to go that
No,
far, but
no.
it's a
I mean, yes, there are elements of greed, but I don't want to discount the element of the idealism because it is there. I mean,
isn't that just a comfortable cloak to make us feel better? Though?
No, at the
No.
beginning of this, it was not greed. This was,
Okay.
yeah, well, let's get rid of some of these killing angels and put them out here. But think of all the wagon trains and families that headed west looking
Right.
to get away from the government becoming more of a factor in their lives and telling
Okay.
them what they
Yep.
could and couldn't do after the Civil War and stuff. They were going west to find their freedom again, to start over, to build again, raise something for their families. And then as the people went out, of course, production, manufacturing, the businesses, the railroads, everything else followed. And that's when your greed really fired up, when they saw what was available out there.
And that's the Deadwood analogy. When it finally reaches that level, then you have the greed
Right.
comes out.
Yeah, the Carnegie, the Rockefellers, let's build the railroads.
Perhaps what you're referring to, if you want to use a TV series to show it, would be 1883.
That would be
Because
good.
that was, and I don't think you guys have seen that, but it's with Tim McGraw, Faith Hill, and the great Sam Elliott. It's about a group they're going to Oregon from Texas, and most of them are non-English speaking immigrants that really can't do anything. They've come from Germany in most places, and what is it? 90+% of them do not survive the trip.
Yeah.
Because they are just
You're
so.
prepared for it.
What-
They have no concept of what they're
Yeah,
going
well,
into.
exactly. It wasn't a preparation as in a physical being ready. It's an ignorance in many respects. I mean, there's one scene that I never will forget in one of those first episodes. You know what I'm talking about. When they leave Texas, which, you know, of course, there's a scene where a young girl goes to relieve herself against a tree and her ass gets bitten by a rattlesnake. She dies. It's done. And so many of them, they camp on a river time and they're drinking water out of the river. When they get there, pure, and Sam Elliott's just kind of saying, you're supposed to boil that, but, you know, they don't know the language. And so many of them get sick and die. And it's just like over and over and over again. By the time they reach, you know, where they end up, most of them don't survive. So it's kind of like this was a terrible, harsh prospect that people just kind of stumbled into out of this idealism
Yeah.
you're talking about,
Right.
saying, I want a better life for myself, not recognizing that they're.
Well, those immigrants were escaping Europe, and what they couldn't
Correct.
do anything over
Yes,
there without
yes.
permission of the knights, the landowners.
That's right. And
whoever.
that comes out, too, is that's
But
one of the
you
things.
also had the people that had farms and stuff here during the Civil War that was burnt out, everything they lost. I mean, their homes and everything that decided to head west too for a start
Sure.
over.
It's complicated, as
So
Trevor
many-
would
I
say.
mean, those are good points. So much of Virginia and places are just laid waste.
I mean,
Yes.
kind of like you and me going and buying a mountaintop somewhere and saying, "The heck with society, let's get away from all this now."
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
So-
Sherman's March to the Sea is obvious,
Yeah. So there's a personal idealism inherent in manifest destiny of we've got to start over. The place to start over is out west, and then there's a political idealism. Again, it's a little more nebulous, but it is this idea of we don't want this continent broken into pieces that are going to turn into what we left. We don't.
Well,
want
and
to
we-
I
go
love
back
that.
to
That's
what
it's
we
it's
left.
it is essentially a reactionaryism to that which they left in Europe.
Right.
Well,
what
What
it's
they
they,
saw
also-
as flawed.
what
it-
they
it-
know is Europe fighting all the time.
Well, we also don't want those dirty little brown people south of the Texas border to come up north and take stuff either.
Yeah, well, and that's
There is some of that. So even
yes,
though we
yeah.
were
especially
willing
the
to
Mexican
tolerate
American
the,
War. Yeah,
the Christianized Mexicans, we wanted them to keep their place still. I mean,
well, and a lot of that is, remember, the Alamo, the
Yes.
Mexican American War, and the Texas independence, and all this sort of stuff.
Again,
There's
they-
a
they
there's
changed
that's a
Gates' whole-
reactionaryism here to
Yeah.
we got our
And-
asses
well,
whooped at the
this-
Alamo, and we don't like that.
yes.
Well, you have to. We had a whole group of these individuals, like you were saying, the unpreparedness of them for
Yeah.
what was going on, just because of the fact that they were influenced as a herd by the propaganda. Go west.
You're exactly right. And,
Yes.
to their death for many.
Yeah, and then you had a bunch of them that came across the Cumberland Gap and said, "The hell with this. We're just staying right here. That was enough."
Well, it's interesting you mentioned
That's how we got. Well, that's how we got your family.
pretty much.
Yeah, that's right.
So what you're saying is they're a bunch of quitters?
Yes.
Mine
Yes.
too.
Kentucky is a bunch of quitters.
That's right, because they didn't go far enough.
Yeah.
Didn't go far enough.
Well, have you ever seen what it's like though in the Appalachians? Have you been there?
Oh yeah. No, I
So
did
Yeah,
a lot.
it's hard.
yeah, it's hard.
Harsh.
It is.
Harsh,
Very
harsh
harsh.
living. That's right.
know,
It is amazing they didn't keep going.
No, it's amazing that they got that far at all.
Well, that's right. Well, I mean,
Because when you go,
Boone's discovery of the Cumberland Gap is what changed it because you
Well,
couldn't,
even
you
so,
couldn't get here.
it's not
without
like that
something
was
like
a
that.
5-lane highway going both ways.
Not at all.
So
It's
when
hard.
you go to Eastern Kentucky and you see
Oh,
the
yeah.
mountains and how thick the trees are, and you realize what you see in this small area, you have to apply that everywhere.
Mhm.
And you realize that people were willing to blaze a trail through that to get to the other side of the mountains. That is just to me astounding. The fact that they didn't stop before they got to the top of the mountain, much less just on the other
Well,
side.
because there's a hell of a lot of people already there that did just that and said, "Get the hell out of here."
Well, yeah, but the first people who got there.
That's right,
I mean,
yeah.
literally the trailblazers to me are just.
Oh, so I shall present then that instead of the bald eagle being our national symbol, it should have been the bison because they're the ones that provided railroads to get through this stuff from
Yeah.
their massive
Well,
migration.
there was some talk about that at one
Yeah,
point. That's
yeah.
right. That's
Instead
why
of the turkey like Franklin came up with.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah, well, he was a little busy doing sex and drugs and rock and roll. Well, maybe not rock and roll, but
Oh,
he was the ultimate hedonist.
Yeah,
Sex,
the
My
18th
point
century.
was-
sex and slaves in rock and roll.
Yeah. But the point was, though, bison did help open up this country and gave the settlers
Yes.
and
Yeah.
travelers a way to get through some of this.
Yes.
Well, and
That's-
some of that too goes back. It's not
fascinating.
just bison, but a lot of the riches out here were in the zoological variety. Beaver hats.
Oh,
Just
yes.
the trappers of the early time. They
Late 1700s,
that's right,
early
they're
1800s.
blazing the trail
yes.
out here because of the financial incentive of trapping beavers and pelts and things like that for the beaver hats, which were enormously popular, especially in Europe. That made people realize that are living back here. This, of course, before the Civil War. Wow, if we're willing to do like you say, cut through to this untamed land, there's money to be made. And there's
Well,
that
and-
capitalism, that greed. Call it one side or the other. Yeah.
A little column
Well-
A, little column B.
That's
I
right.
mean, it's not necessarily greed. It's everybody's got to make a living.
Well, exactly. I don't want to paint the concept that way, but eventually, because human natures are humans are they
Right.
are.
Yeah,
The
because
greedy are going to see this and attempt to exploit everybody
Well,
out there.
those
Well,
who
let's-
are willing to do it.
The
more efficiently.
swearingens, you know.
well, but even so, so I think there's a couple of things that I think is worth pointing out here real quick. First, Imperator here started to mention this, and this is something I was thinking right before he was talking about it. You know, and Martin alluded to this. The idea of Manifest Destiny, that philosophical background, that paved the way in the minds of the people
Yes.
that going west, taming the continent, was a good thing. That it was something that needed to be done. It was the national duty.
Yep.
And yes, there. You know, I hate to just use the word greed because it's not just greed. There's many parts greed, self improvement, betterment, looking to create a better life for your family. All of those things, go into the milieu of the time.
Good word.
Word boner.
Yeah.
And all of that kind of creates a perfect storm, and because it's not just those who are out to make a quick buck.
No.
It's everybody from those like a Swearingen, an Al
Yeah.
Swearingen,
Right.
to the couple that owned a small family farm down in Georgia that got burned out by Sherman, that didn't necessarily own any slaves, because not all Southerners did,
Yeah.
that were looking to rebuild a life. And so they went somewhere where they could try and create what they had in a new place, because a lot of them went out to farm.
Then,
That was the whole point of Manifest Destiny, was to recreate the agrarian East.
yeah, and the Homestead Act certainly contributed to a little bit of
Yes.
that. But I have to ask the question, though, how much of this or not is that human desire to explore? I'm going to go to the frontier, the final frontier, for example, where Star Trek's kind of built on that. We're wanting to go out and seek out new life, new civilizations, so to speak. Transpose that into this time period. Is that
Well-
not what that was about? At least
no,
partially.
you're getting ahead of yourself. That you have to go backwards for that with the
Yeah.
trappers, the fur traders.
Right. That's what
That was when they're exploring Lewis and Clark. By this point, with Manifest Destiny, they're trying to build it up, and like I say, the families, the wagon trains, civilization.
It's already been
moving.
scouted and it's proven itself worthy.
Right. You have to
Yes.
back up a little bit for that point with
Right.
the exploration.
There's proof-
Yeah.
But it
The
is a
opportunities.
component. It is.
Oh,
a-
Yeah.
There is a
But-
component to it.
And Robert's right. I mean, anybody who thought there was a quick buck to be made by moving west found out differently.
Right.
Oh,
that was
yeah.
a very
It wasn't-
small
it wasn't
percentage.
until much later, after a
Imperator
lot of
had
this
something.
stuff
Well, I
is
mean,
tamed.
one of the things you've got is the people in power in this country have been able to sell quite well the idea of dreams.
Oh, very good. You're exactly
And
right. That's what we're kind of dancing
the
around.
dreams that we sell in this country, they really change generationally, but they're very powerful, because you've got that
Mhm.
and it's not just Manifest Destiny or what have you. You had it happen with Martin Luther King. He was selling a dream.
Sure.
Everything in this country, the American dream.
Yeah, that's kind of what
Which-
we're talking about here.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I literally was contemplating the meaning of the American dream recently, because if you ask 10 people what the American dream is, you're going to get 10 different answers.
Exactly.
And the American dream is such a nebulously defined
key.
concept right now.
As is
Um,
Manifest Destiny. So-
Yes.
In many ways, of a certain generation, our parents, probably specifically, to them, the American dream was owning your own home.
Mhm.
And
So
Exactly.
it changes and morphs
Oh,
over
absolutely.
time.
Yes.
Yeah.
and now that owning your own home is a direct outgrowth of the destitution of the Depression.
The Depression.
Right. Is there
And-
not some sort of core though that makes all of
Well,
these things?
Yeah, and that's where I'm getting.
Yeah, that's what
Because
I'm thinking
it goes back to, I think, in many ways, Manifest Destiny is the American dream. It is
Yeah.
the core of it, because it goes back to what Cajun and I had stated a couple of times, that desire to take your family and make it better, to do better for it, to have a posterity,
A legacy
a
Yeah.
legacy.
differs from what their experience and their forebears' existence and experience had been.
And in a better way, specifically.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that probably, I think, at the core of any version of the American dream is usually going to be that we leave a better world for our children, that they do better than we did.
Yes.
Yeah, and I know we call that uniquely American.
I think that's human nature,
Well,
really.
it's got to be
Yeah.
broader than that. And yet, there is some truth to the fact that so many other systems out there, which we've talked about a lot on this show, don't have that. Aren't even close. The European system, the feudal system, and
Exactly.
the absolute monarchs and divine right of kings, and all those things that we essentially are attempting to repudiate.
Well, that's because
even
we are-
Rome didn't have all that.
Well,
A
that's
little, but
it's a fundamental difference between what it means to be an American versus a European. We are citizens. Their history is their subjects.
subject. Yeah, that's right.
That's an entirely different mindset.
And
you know,
yet,
I think a big thing though on that is the amount of space you had. Think about
And
it. There's
that
only
too,
4 or
yes.
5 places in the world that's got the space like we do. Us, Australia, Russia,
Canada.
China, Canada. I mean, that had the room to expand, but depending on what the social economic system was and everything, does make a difference on that. But yeah, I think you had to have the room for it, and that so much feudal system and stuff throughout Europe that's dealing with a much smaller space.
by
Yes.
definition, feudalism is always local, but yet technology, of course, kind of blows that out of the water now. But nevertheless, it's kind of like it's a fascinating experience in human nature that, as we've often said, all systems of government stem from the will of the people, one way or the other. And the Roman system seems to be one of the things we directly copied, the Republic in particular, to give these essential freedoms of citizenship, which is a Roman concept.
Yes, citizenship, because it not only has rights, but it has responsibilities.
Right, which is something that is not part of the European model. And I'm kind of wondering.
No, European model is not even rights and responsibilities; it is duties.
That's correct. And
Subjects
nothing else.
have
What
duties,
you
and
owe.
that's it.
Yes, what you owe.
Everything is owned by the sovereign and flows from the sovereign. It's a very
Yes.
that's a fascinating subject. We'll probably put a pin in because I'd love to come back to that.
Okay, on legacies and stuff, isn't it about time?
Yeah. Speaking of which, it's time to break that bourbon. Oh yes, love that sound.
Well done, Robert.
Thank you, thank you.
All right, I think we've switched up some of the bourbons this time around. I'll start off myself this time. I went to the Basil Hayden, which is nice, it's clean, it's crisp. Really enjoying this more. My first experience with Basil Hayden happened to be the rye Basil Hayden. That was not a good
Yeah,
experience.
no,
to
it's
me.
totally
I
different.
did not care for that one at all. So this is a very pleasant, more wheat-based one here that I'm thoroughly enjoying.
Speaking of rye, were both of you guys there at Imaginarium when we talked to the gentleman?
Yes,
that,
Greg.
Rick, that spoke glowingly of rye whiskey?
Some people love that peppery bun lingering around.
Because we
ruining
were all kind of like,
everything else.
ooh, that's just not kind of the thing here. But yet he was glowing about that.
It's just taste buds, you know. People like different things.
It's just what your palate likes.
I'm just curious because that we're all kind of the same, and yet we recognize there's others out there that are different.
Sure. I mean,
Well-
there are people who like all kinds of different things. I mean, some people like fruity drinks with umbrellas.
Some people like the Detroit Tigers. I mean,
Some people like paint thinner, sake.
Well, yeah,
That's what
there's-
sake reminds me of, is paint thinner. So, you know.
especially when it's served at the proper temperature, 98.4
Martin.
degrees Fahrenheit.
I think part of
I mean, it's just
Give a man an agonizer, and he goes all the way with it.
part of what you guys are seeing though is a representation of what you all grew up with.
Oh, yeah.
Because
That's
what you all
Yeah.
what, you all,
Yeah.
what,
Oh,
grew- what
very
people
much.
grew up with around here was Maker's Mark.
in
that
many
was-
ways, yeah, it was
That
one of the
was
most.
one of the things the generation prior to us, as far as bourbons go, there were the vast majority of them around here.
Actually, as strange as it may
Maker's Mark.
sound, Jack Daniels was a big factor when we were young in this area. Even though we were sitting in
Yeah.
the bourbon capital of the
This is
world,
true.
everybody was drinking Jack Daniels back in that
Yeah,
day.
Jack
This
and
is
Coke
true.
was the big thing. Now,
But-
I did
but
not
as
grow
far
up
as
here, so
bourbons go-
bourbon was not ever on my
Was it
radar
in
as a
your
child.
family?
No. My mom drank Canadian whiskey.
Of course, yeah, like
Okay.
Seagram 7, right?
Yes.
And stuff like that.
Yep,
Which actually
seven
was not bad. I
VO
mean, I
was the
remember-
other one she
'Cause my
did.
dad worked for Seagram's, and we featured some of that. Now I prefer the Eagle Rare, which was their bourbon, but the 7-7 wasn't bad.
Well, 7 is Seagram 7 and 7 Up.
Well, exactly. I know it was one of those.
Oh, I picked up a bottle of 10-year Eagle Rare too the other day.
Well, when we're out at your place,
That's
that's
hard
what
to-
we're having.
He's gonna hide all the good stuff the next time we
hard
come
to
out.
get
I was
hands
gonna
on.
say,
Key, baby.
that's right. We're
Exactly.
that's one that I want because that was, I think, and you know this because we shared it. The first bourbon we probably ever drank was Eagle Rare.
Yes.
You remember that? It was that
Yeah.
because my dad had bought a thing for one of my sisters.
Second communion.
First communion. That's right.
First communion.
One first communion, and that was, and of course we were
I
kind
want
of.
to say it's Christina's.
I want to say that's right. Yeah, exactly.
So
And
you were smuggling out your family's booze?
essentially that. Well, we just.
Well, no, back in that day, they passed around to the kids too. We didn't have
Yeah,
to
remember
smoke
we're
at all.
Gen X.
Yeah,
that's
that's-
that's
Yeah,
what you
it
did.
wasn't a thing. So yeah, we had ourselves some, and we had Eagle Rare and Coke, which sounds like a sacrilege today, but it was
Highball.
a highball. It was able to make it palatable, but it was very good. I mean, it was
That's hard stuff. To
Well,
get.
when we first started drinking with the Basil Hayden, we drank it with Coke because,
it's the
drinking
gateway.
bourbon by itself, even on the rocks, that's a hard thing to start with.
It is.
It is.
It's an adjustment process.
Yeah,
That's right. It's a maturity of the taste buds that has to occur to really get to there.
that you
Oh, is
just
that
burn
a
'em out.
deadening of our taste buds with
Exactly.
age that allows us to enjoy it
And
that
that
way?
is a very good argument. You're
Yes.
right.
So I'll go next. We are skipping the Imperator because he never imbibes with the bourbon because of his issues. I actually have dipped back into history and brought out the bottle of the Jim Beam Devil's Cut.
Though that is a callback.
We have
haven't
not
had that in a long.
Yes,
Yeah,
call back, not a reach back,
that's right.
or a reach around.
Reach around.
around.
Don't do that. Yeah.
Sound like an old lady reaches around myself, but
Well, as long as it's the old lady and not somebody else. So the Devil's Cut is it's an interesting bourbon because one, you don't think of Jim Beam as a high end, and this is not exactly high end. I mean, it's a screw top bottle and all, and it's got a good bite to it. You definitely know you're drinking hard alcohol.
It's
when-
been so long since we tried it. I suspect our palates are far more developed now.
Yes. It is. Let's see. It is a 90 proof, so it's kind of in that middle range of
not exceptionally high. Yeah.
but like I said, it definitely does have a good bite to it. When you have it, I always like to take a sip early to get a baseline of what it's like, and it still has a good amount of flavor, though. That's the interesting thing about it, because a lot of times when you get those really harsh, biting bourbons, they have a very medicinal taste, and this one does not, even straight up.
Yeah.
Um,
I was going to say, it take a bit, sir, Mr. Howard. The bottle stands by you.
Yeah, it's not got a whole lot of sweetness in there. There's definitely a very smoky bit to it. I wouldn't exactly say licorice like you were talking about with the Russells, but it's a little similar to that in that sense. You feel it hang around in the mouth.
yeah.
But it's good. It's a nice change of pace.
Yeah,
and that's what I like
I think
it
I'll
for.
try that next time because it's been
Plenty.
literally years. I mean, that was one of the earlier ones that we tried, and I just never have.
Yeah, it's probably been a year and a half since we've
Absolutely,
since we first
yeah.
had it,
And,
which is a lot of episodes.
And we've come a long way, baby. I'd like to say, Martin, what do you got?
So I have dipped into Robert's stash of Four Roses single barrel strength, and this is a private selection bottle, selected for and bottled for the Friends of Stoll, Kennan, Ogden, PLLC. So, do
Really?
you know somebody in a law firm, Robert?
No, my pastor gave that to me.
I was going to say because
you
I
know,
know
for
I know
Christmas.
that law firm. I know of them.
So-
Well, I've seen that now. Granted, that particular batch might have been that way, and maybe he regifted it. I don't know, which is perfectly fine. He's a Scotch man, not a bourbon man, so that would be perfectly acceptable. But I've seen that bottle, that single barrel strength, on the shelves. So
Yeah,
that
there's one out
particular,
on my shelf.
yeah,
Francis Jr. got into it the last time he was out there.
I thought it was
Ah.
Flatboat that I was drinking last
No,
time.
I
Junior.
didn't say you, I said Francis Jr.
yes, my. Oh, yeah. Did he now?
Yes, he's the one that got
Really?
into the Four Roses
I
single
didn't
bottle.
realize that.
so
the
that
little
particular
guy.
batch might have been specially.
Yes, this is
bottled.
a private selection bottle, but it's the barrel strength, single barrel. what did we say? 93 proof, and
103 proof because I think it's 51.5%.
oh yes, you're right. 103 proof.
That's up there.
35% rye in the mash bill.
Yeah.
So
And
it's
you're
a
not
high
having a
rye.
reaction against that?
No, well, it's aged 10 years.
Oh.
So this is very mellow, very mellow.
some big stuff.
It is
in.
peppery, but it's like just a regular sort of a little dose of a little black pepper on almost like black pepper on a potato or something. It's mellow but pepper.
Interesting.
Not like super
I was
spicy.
gonna say because I know
crazy,
I've never
like-
tried that one.
like
I've
hot
had the,
or anything. It's mellow but peppery.
Now we'll have to see when we do the next episode if it's still hanging around because that's one of the things that I don't like about a high rye content is how it hangs around and basically puts off any other bourbon you have for the rest of the day.
really, and that's a very different one than the single batch than the because
Small batch.
small batch Four Roses, which we've featured frequently
Yes.
here. This
Yes,
is
that is the third different kind of small Four Roses.
Yeah,
that
That's
we've
what I'm.
had.
That's what I'm trying to make sure I get
Yeah.
clear here because
Yeah.
that's a totally different one. I've never had that one, but I've had the other one several times.
Yes, the we do have some of the small batch, which is a blend of four bourbons.
Right.
Up there right now.
And not that rye haters here or anything.
No,
'cause
no.
Every
No.
bill mash has a percentage of rye in it, even if they claim it's a wheated bourbon. There's still a percentage of rye in that bill mash.
Yes,
It's just the amounts that make the difference.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah,
Well, yeah,
this
because
is,
I think we've all come to we have similar thresholds where above that it's
51%
not as
corn.
good. Yeah, that's right. Have to have
Start
that.
with the base, and then the other 50% is a development between rye and wheat, depending on which one's dominant
Right.
or the mix
Yes.
of it.
And it's the blending of those different grains and whatever else they may decide to add in there is that's what makes the bourbons unique. It's the blend
Absolutely.
and how long you age it, how much you char the barrel. There are an infinite number of ways to produce your bourbon, and it's not just how much rye or wheat or corn that you have.
Sure, and you can get varying degrees of whoa, Martin took a big old honking drink there.
Well, perfect example. Pappy's and Willa, exact same
Yes.
mash bill. It's all in the differences on, like you say, the barrels, the aging, the chewing, but it's the exact same mash bill for both Pappy or Willa.
Yeah, there you go.
And I got to say that Weller's we had at your place
Very much so.
several
Yeah,
months ago.
because we had that.
That was heavenly.
It really was.
Absolutely heavenly.
That and the Bookers too. The
Oh,
Bookers
yes, the Bookers
was
was-
amazing.
We
Yeah,
had that after your mom's funeral. I
Yeah,
think.
the buckles will curl your hairs.
yeah.
And speaking of curling your hairs, what are you on this time
I'm
around?
finishing off the Wilderness Road. It's got a rawness to it. I don't think I mentioned that the last time I had it, and I don't know what that is. There's a sweetness to it. You're right.
Yes.
I don't know that there's rye in it that I can detect anyway. Of course, my palate's usually
Well, I'm sure there is, but it's
like
a
I
very
say,
minute
it's
amount.
minuscule.
I think.
It's got a little sweetness to it, but it's almost like it's not meant to be sophisticated. It's meant to have an edge to it. Is how I take that to that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And it's kind of amazing that we can all drink at one point or another the same bottle, literally, not just the same brand, but the same bottle, and come up with amazingly different approaches. Although we usually bow to Martin and his discerning palate. I think Cajun
Cajuns,
might have him
yes,
beat on that.
Yes, I think so. May have to bow. So, gentlemen, can I tail on to bourbon break with something
Of course.
Sure.
very briefly?
Oh yes.
So I believe it's attributed to Joseph Stalin, the saying that gratitude is a disease of dogs. Much
Interesting.
like with other
Should have
things,
saved that for Code of Honor. That's pretty damn good.
much like other things, Mr. Stalin was wrong.
Yeah.
Gratitude is, I find, one of the pieces of the human condition that is unifying and uplifting.
Amen.
And
Hail the Empire.
The hell, the Empire. That's right.
not only does what someone does for you uplift you, but the feeling of gratitude is so uplifting beyond that, that it heals the heart.
Amen,
And
brother.
I want to express my gratitude, especially to Francis, but also to the entire Brotherhood for their good thoughts and everything. Mrs. Martin's mother recently passed,
Yeah, not even a week as we record this.
Yes,
Yeah.
as we lift a glass to her
Mhm.
memory. But Frances presided over a brief service, and even the little Presbyterian ladies from the mother-in-law's little church there loved his service. And
Yes, I was furiously scribbling notes during it so that I could crib it for my next.
Really?
next
Well,
funeral.
thank you for that.
It-
I
it-
appreciate that very much.
Sometimes I think Francis may have missed his calling. He probably should have been a black man who is the preacher at an AME
Oh,
type
really?
church. He did an awesome job, and
Well, I was leaning into the Protestant Presbyterian business because I knew my audience,
knew
and
his
I
audience.
wanted to make sure that
we had a very ecumenical
it was
audience.
very
We
much
did,
so.
yes, because I sat in the back with all the Catholics.
Yes,
course, that's right.
yes. So again, that's kind of a unique thing. The parts of the family that were related to my wife's father, they're all Catholic.
Yeah.
Some of them even Robert's parishioners
Yes,
in the past.
Right.
So we had a very ecumenical gathering and service in
Based on
memory.
the rite was a Catholic rite. I played with it a little bit, and because there's so many options you can pick.
yes.
Pick the ones that worked.
I thought it was interesting. You chose the gospel reading that I most often choose
Absolutely.
for funerals.
Yeah.
It's very common for
Raising
them,
of
but
Lazarus.
yes.
That's my go-to.
Yeah.
John chapter 11, and because there's power in it.
yeah,
There's
well, John-
power in it. Yeah.
My favorite gospel amongst the four is John.
Yeah.
Absolutely. John is the one that is full of theology, and to me, that I could spend the rest of my life just contemplating John.
Yeah, it's so amazing. So I'm glad that it worked. It really was. It was my honor.
You
and
did a fine job.
thank you
sir.
to
You did.
your wife and her sister for asking me.
It meant. I mean, you just don't know how much it meant to them, and it means a lot to me.
Of course.
And
And if you tear up, that's okay. Jesus wept, and so can you.
again, I would just express my gratitude for how wonderful it was, and for all of your good thoughts, and everybody being there that was able to come, and
It was my honor. It was kind of
wonderful to have great friends.
it was kind of funny to watch too. From where I was standing up front, we had rows of chairs, and they're four across, and your wife and her sister and you were sitting in the front, but your mother-in-law's four grandsons
yes.
were in the row next to each other, immediately behind them, so I could address them directly.
I tell you
which
what.
I don't know if they liked it when I called them out so much, but
No,
They
but you know
did.
what?
They did.
The boys take care of your mothers was excellent.
yeah, that's correct. And it just
It
so happens
really
there are four grandsons. There are no
Yeah.
granddaughters.
Yeah, and it's going to be difficult for my wife's sister.
Absolutely.
Yes. Well, it's going to be difficult for both, but yes. But Becky,
She's
lived
by
with it.
herself.
Yeah.
That's
and
correct. And
She was the caregiver, a primary caregiver for 2 years with my mother-in-law's conditions, and she's going to go through many, many things.
that is correct.
There's-
And I tried to allude to
there'll
that
be
in
a
the homily,
relief,
that
and
you
then
have
there'll
to
be
go through this.
a guilt
You have
to the
go through this.
relief, and it's just there's a lot of things to go through.
Yes, our
I
man
can
Cajun
second
can
that.
speak to that.
Yeah,
Yep.
That's right,
Yeah,
because he
my
lost.
mother just passed away at the beginning of May, which I'd taken care of for the last several years, and my father before her. So for the last 8 years, I was pretty much a caretaker for my elderly parents.
yeah.
Yep.
It's difficult, and you get there's so many emotions to it.
Of course.
And so a tribute to Mama,
Amen.
and a lot of appreciation.
Shall we raise our glasses?
Yes, absolutely. We're all a little too far apart to.
Well, yeah, well,
clink the glass.
the glasses are raised and the drinks are consumed.
Yes.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate
Well,
that.
happy to afford you that moment.
Yes.
Yes.
Francis is quite the great preacher.
I appreciate that. It was my honor. I actually got the opportunity to preach at Cajun's mom's funeral as well,
Yep.
as his dad for 4 years
And
ago.
Robert also took part in that.
That's correct.
Yes,
we did.
I did readings, which was quite the honor to do. I was very pleased to help out.
And then we went back to his place and drank bourbon.
Yes.
Very good, Bourbon.
Very good. That's
Oh,
right.
yes.
That's right.
Yes.
Let's be clear with that. Yes, this is the bourbon break, actually.
Yes.
So
Yes.
yeah.
That was when we had the Bookers, and that
That's
was
right.
that
It
was
was
some
just
real
kinda-
good stuff.
And one other brief
Big boy
thank you.
bourbon.
One other
was
brief
that?
thank you that I have to do to my wife's friends, D and R and S, we don't have to give the whole names, but they were responsible for all the flamingos that uplifted everyone.
What was with the flamingos? We presumed it was an an E thing.
Well, it's more of a Mrs. Martin thing.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Yeah, so that's been like an ongoing prank thing for like 15 years. Birthdays.
Okay.
When we moved into our house a couple of days later, there were 2 metal flamingos in the landscaping. The shirt that our friend Dee was wearing, that was a birthday present from us.
Okay.
Oh, really?
Okay.
Okay, that's cool.
Okay, so that's just kind of a prank thing that we've been doing for a long time. And Mama would have laughed. She
Well, good.
would
There you
have
go.
thought
So
that
to
was very
prank
funny.
y'all, we need flamingos. To prank Francis, we need garden gnomes. What about you?
I
You?
Yankee stuff.
No, I know Robert's Ohio State stuff.
Oh, okay.
That's pretty. Think on that a little.
What
bit.
about the Emperor? What's he get pranked with?
Oh, there's very few things you can surprise me with in my old age.
Oh, a challenge. I love it.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah.
We're about the same. I can't really say anything off the top of my head either. I guess I could park a big John Deere in your front yard there or something.
That's true.
yes,
He
that
is-
would be.
that's-
We
the
have an
John
ongoing
Deeres,
thing between red and green between me and the Emperor here.
well, that or orange.
Mm.
Well, yeah, because he's an international harvester, man.
Yes.
That's right.
That and Kubotas.
Kubotas is
I like
cool.
Kubotas, yeah.
We got a nice big dealership out near us now that just recently expanded. So yeah,
Oh, and speaking of expansion, I guess that brings us back around to the subject at hand.
happy to tee up.
Nice
Yeah,
segue there.
that's right.
Very
Nice
good.
segue.
Very well.
Hey, I'm just good. That's all it is.
Yeah, that might save you from a garden gnome next week.
Appreciate that. Well, yeah, it's bad enough for me, but it's Her Majesty that will
I
have a
know,
visceral
that's what I
reaction.
love about it.
Well, somebody actually gave us one of those, which we took out to your place and used for target practice. It was
Nice.
so liberating.
Nice. Yes. So expansion. Yes. Back to the topic at hand. Don't everybody talk at once.
So there is a central figure to Manifest Destiny.
Mr. Greeley?
No. Somebody that we would tangentially hit, James K. Polk.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
okay,
that's very true.
You
Yeah.
know, he is again a central figure. He, in being a Southerner taking the White House, was able to make into policy this nebulous notion of moving west, accepting Texas into the Union, expanding slavery at the point of, wait a minute, hold on, we don't want to do that. That upsets everything. He plowed ahead, and again, as Grant famously said, this is a wicked thing that we've done here. A strong nation taking advantage of a weak purely for territorial gain, much like who we don't want to be, the Europeans, the European
Right.
monarchists.
Yeah. The more we tried not to be like them, the more we ended up like them.
Yeah, very much. So Polk is really a central figure in this whole thing of making real all of these nebulous ideas from the early 19th century,
So
making them into a real policy and something he was able to execute and do.
let me throw this question out here, and maybe this is a good way to tie things together.
The hammer once again, gentlemen, ladies and
Well
gentlemen.
done.
Does our manifest destiny differ from European colonialism in this way? Colonialism was often, like much of what drove European conflict,
Mm-hmm.
for the personal glory of the monarch
Oh, so you're tying it in?
versus
Yeah.
Keep going.
the American manifest destiny was the spread of an ideology.
Interesting.
You know, we've talked about how the drive to bring what it means to be Americans, to be citizens to the rest of the country. And remember, we look back at it from a 21st century eyes as, pushing out all of these Native Americans that were there. Well, really, no. much of the country in the West was empty. It really was there for the taking.
It was a
Now,
consolidation.
granted,
of those.
we moved them off of the land that we wanted because, obviously they didn't go to the worst places until they were
Gold.
forced to.
Yeah, well,
Black Hills.
The Black Hills is
Right.
absolutely
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, that's a prime
all you had to do
example.
was whisper gold, and okay, well, that was good enough.
Yeah.
Right.
To,
But even the plains in the West, when people realized, hey, you know what? My farm would look really good right there.
Water.
Yes, water.
Yeah.
Yeah, agriculture. Yes.
But the Black Hills, that's a funny thing, though. We moved the Indians from somewhere else to the Black Hills first.
That's
Right,
And then
because
they
who would want
discovered
them?
gold there after we'd already moved them out of the way of somewhere else.
Absolutely.
and then
That-
had to move them out of the Black Hills to get at the gold.
and
Yes.
all Custer's all tied up in all that. Yeah, that's right.
So, but generally speaking, obviously the gold and then wanting to use the land. I mean, that moved particular groups around, and I freely admit that. But the general drive to the West, I think it was more of an ideologically driven thing than European colonialism. The European monarchs, they could have cared less about exporting monarchy
Right.
so much as,
Right.
I mean, look at the King of Belgium. I mean, he's the worst
Exactly.
example.
I knew. Actually, I'm glad
Yes.
you brought him up because
Yes.
if you weren't, Martin was going to.
Yes, I mean that is the cleanest, clearest example. He saw the Congo not as Belgian property, but as personal property of his own.
Right.
This was his own place, and whatever happened there, he didn't care as long as they extracted whatever he could make money on.
Right. Whatever troubles that are going on in the Congo, you can definitely trace back to him for sure.
Yeah. So there's Leopold II.
That's right.
I agree with you wholeheartedly on that difference.
think
I
you're
mean,
right.
in the West was even so much more as an open area for those minorities, those subjugated, those enslaved, those looked down upon, those that were second class, whether they be black, women, Indians, where they could go out and make a life for themselves away from most of society that was holding them down too.
And the prejudice.
Prime example, look at Marshall Bass that did the Indian Territories, one of the greatest lawmen ever was,
Right.
black man.
Yes. Well, that's something that's to use a turn of phrase, is incredibly whitewashed in our history. Is how many of the cowboys that we think of were black.
That's right.
They were
House
former
boy,
slaves.
stable boy, cowboy. I mean,
Yeah.
they were Mexican, they were vaquero.
Right. Right. The white man was not the cowboy that we
No.
think he was. I mean, yes, there were. Don't get me
They
wrong.
became it, but
and-
yeah.
Well, and
you're
cowboy
exactly
was a
right.
derogatory term. I mean, it was
Yeah.
meant as somebody that was.
Where did women get the first vote for themselves? Out west.
Very true. Yes.
That's right.
Yes.
I mean, the West afforded opportunities to all races, classes, sexualities. I mean, that wasn't afforded anywhere else in the country at the time.
There's
yeah,
some-
that's a great point. It's probably, in many ways, the drive west and how things played out is a better expression of the all men are created equal premise this country is
is.
supposedly founded
It
on
is. It is.
than any other point in our history.
And if there's any argument about it, Sam Colt made the difference,
That's right.
whether
Yeah,
they were
tech-
male or female.
technology certainly did change things a lot because it's not that dissimilar from when the original 13 colonies were settled. It was the same thing. We're going to make a better lives for ourselves there in an untamed wilderness with very little technology.
Right.
It
And-
moved faster because of that
Yeah.
at this time.
Well,
But as we've talked about, you had to get along too, because, okay, you could be in these neighborhoods in the east that were all alike,
Mhm.
but as you moved west, that was gone. You
Yeah,
had
there's
to
no
get along.
ghettoization.
Right, exactly. No ghettoization. I'm sorry, I interrupted
no,
the
no,
Imperator.
no.
Please go ahead.
Well, what I was thinking of was, speaking of technology, the two things that really drove Manifest Destiny, that enabled it, were the telegraph
Yes,
and newspapers.
very much so.
Yeah.
And one of the things you didn't have so much in Europe was the local papers and what have you, like you've got here.
Well, yeah, freedom of the
At
press
time.
was a
It
non
was.
sequitur for most of them.
And what ended up happening was, as part of that propaganda, the serialization of the results of Manifest Destiny, of the people in the West and the glorification,
Telling
of
their
the
stories.
cowboys,
Yeah.
I'm
Wild
glad
Bill
you mentioned,
Cody,
Wyatt
Ah.
Earp and all the rest of them.
Earp,
The
yeah.
legends.
The
The
legends.
building of the
They
legends.
That is exactly
inspired
right, yeah.
people.
Oh,
Yeah,
very- that's
and
glad you went
sold
there, 'cause-
That dream.
very insightful.
This goes back to Davy Crockett.
The West
yes,
was
the
our
Davy
second
Crockett.
phase of our
Daniel
mythology.
Boone.
Oh, yes.
American mythology. The West was the
Exactly.
second phase. The first was Daniel
Exactly.
Boone, Kit Carson,
And
James
so
Fenimore
forth.
Cooper. Yeah, those
And
were
the ones that inspired our generation, Gen X, were the astronauts.
that is
the
correct.
race to the moon,
Yeah, yeah.
airplanes,
Yeah.
spies, all
Chuck
of that
Yeager.
sort of thing.
Yeah.
And we'll have a new one. I don't know what that's going to be. necessarily.
AI taking over.
AI technology.
Our
yes.
Cylon overlords.
Yes.
Exactly.
How are we?
I don't know. I was going to go somewhere else, but I would never
Because God knows,
talk about it on the show.
God knows our writers and editors are being replaced with AI as we speak.
Well, not the good ones.
Well,
we,
how many good ones are there?
Yeah.
Well, there's at least 4 in this
Four.
room.
That's
Oh,
right.
okay,
That's true.
How are we doing on time?
You're the only one not working on a book.
No,
Robert?
actually, I am.
He is.
Oh, you are? I didn't know that.
Let us
no,
celebrate
I
that.
got a deadline coming up on
Fiction or
the
nonfiction?
25th nonfiction,
Okay.
Nonfiction on-
Excellent.
That's new.
Excellent.
Yeah, because we're.
and that it's like I said, I've got a new thing I've got to finish up by next week for NASA.
Right.
Because you are a patented individual, sir. You own patents.
I
That's
am
right.
I am
Which
going
none of the rest of us
through-
can do that. So we should
I'm the inventor, I guess.
hail the empire.
Hail the
Yeah,
Empire.
Any of us
Yeah.
can do that. What do you mean?
I was going to
Yeah.
say. I
You
know.
said none of the rest of us could do
No,
that.
No, I said none of us have done that.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
I misheard
Yeah,
that
no,
one.
no, we have not done that yet.
So,
Well, we have our resident farmer,
Yep.
of which I'm a hobby farmist.
Mhm.
Hobby
I grow
farmer.
bourbon seeds.
Yes.
that's right. Bourbon seeds.
They're glorious too.
They
We've
are, yes.
Recently seen them.
That
What is it
reminds
that-
me, I have to have a discussion with you on that a little bit later.
Okay.
So we are right at 107 here.
Yeah, it's time
gentlemen.
to
I
time to
think
land
so.
this plane. It sounds
Yeah.
like.
Yeah, probably not a bad idea not to usurp Cajun's authority.
It is his first captaincy. We're
Let's
we're
just
trying to help
leave
him.
it.
Well, we often have to remind the captain it's time to close
Yeah,
things
that's
down.
true.
So
Let's just leave it at manifest destiny is complicated. Trevor Slattery.
yes,
Francis, what's next, buddy?
All right, we're going to go call code of honor. It's time. We need,
Yes.
we need to do that.
Mhm.
This is not. This is going to be free for all. We love those free for alls where we're going to kind of lay out stuff. I did like that Stalin quote you used. So
Mhm,
you don't
that
have to do
was
it
a
next
good
time,
one.
but one of these days you're going to have to. Stalin's probably a cool one too. We've
Yeah,
never
it's
done.
a counterintuitive.
Absolutely.
Again, as he was in so many things, Mr. Stalin was wrong.
Well, that's correct. But hey, that doesn't mean that the quote is any less worthy of exploring, though. So that's what we're going to do next time. We're going to explore some great quotations. So make sure you're here.
we hope you enjoyed another pointless discussion of eternal questions. Remember, new episodes drop every second and fourth Friday at 6 a.m. Eastern, just in time for your morning commute. And every fifth Friday, we drop a special Hoopajube episode. Spread the word we are on all the major platforms, and leave us a review. That helps others find us. We're also on Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube, as well as our website, snakesandotters.com. Join us next time. Same snake time, same otter channel.